Hopefully I haven't forgotten anything else, so I think we are ready to roll. Thank you guys so much for being here. Um, really excited to share this with you. I think for a number of you, you're going to find this really helpful. I think some people are comfortable kind of just, flying by the seat of their pants, and I think others of us learn better when we have like all the foundational bricks in place. And this is one of those foundational brick type things. So as you know, I'm calling this 80/20 PHP. There is a handout. Here is our handout, and I sent a very quick reminder about 10 minutes before we started the webinar. The link was there, but I will also send it to you in the questions. It is, one second, or chat or something. Here, I'll put it here. Maybe. Nope, come on. Why aren't you copying? Give me a second. By the way, there we go. I have been having internet problems intermittently all day long, so I'm crossing my fingers that this is gonna go off without us getting a terrible connection or something along the way. So we'll just see how it goes. So okay, I see a bunch of you in the handout. Awesome, some coyotes and pumpkins and porpoises. All right. So let's talk. I know that a lot of you who are on the call were in the Extending Infusionsoft webinar that I did on Thursday, and I talked at the end about 80/20 programming. So I am not going to rehash that in nearly as much detail as I did then, but for those of you who were not there, just because there were some, I will very, very quickly talk about the concept of 80/20 and 80/20 programming as I understand it or believe it to be applicable to what we're going to be doing. So the big bullet points are these. There's a reason I call it 80/20 PHP or 80/20 programming, and that is because as I am a big believer in the Pareto principle that 20% of your effort gets you 80% of the results. I do have perfectionist tendencies, believe it or not, but in business, I am all about failing forward. I've always been that way. Some people aren't comfortable with it. I am. So I would much rather fail forward than, sit around and try to get everything perfect, because chances are what I thought was going to be right in the first place generally isn't anyway. And I usually end up changing it. So that's just the way I do things. So 80/20 programming fits very well with my personal mindset. For me personally, I did not start learning the API or PHP in order to become a quote programmer. I have programmers who work for me who do that for a living, but as a business owner and an entrepreneur, I very often found myself in situations where I needed to get very simple things done quickly, cost effectively. My programmers were tied up on things that, big things. They weren't available, they weren't working. It was 3 a.m. and I was trying to get a campaign to work, and I needed this one little stupid thing that I couldn't do with Infusionsoft. And if I just knew a little tiny bit of API, then I could have gotten it done. And that's what, to me, 80/20 programming is all about. That 20% that helps you get that campaign done, or or what have you. Not I don't think that any of us are going to aspire to write Facebook. However, that's not to say that look, everybody had to start somewhere. Mark Zuckerberg had to start with PHP Day One too. So if that is what you aspire to, that's fine too. But for most of us, that's not it. So with that, my rules are these. And my disclaimers are these, okay? Learn this over the last couple of weeks. Number one, absolutely positively, it has to be secure, but I don't believe it has to be perfect. So by not being perfect, what I mean by that is that I may, at times, choose to use deprecated code if it makes it easier or faster for you to learn, or to be able to read, because that is a key to learning how to code. To me, the first thing, I say this all the time, the first thing you have to do is you have to be able to read the code. And the nice thing about PHP is it's very readable, actually, when it's not littered with a bunch of extraneous crap. So if it's just the pure PHP, then it's pretty easy once you get the 20% of PHP and API to be able to, it's almost like, I don't know if any of you guys ever took a foreign language. I took foreign languages, through school, and even years after I quit taking foreign language, I could pick up a book or in French or Spanish, and even though I can't read it word for word, I can get the gist of it because I can pick out the words, right, that I still know, or the verbs that I still can remember, and I can kind of, piece it together and figure out broadly, what's the gist. And that's kind of where you start, right? Is you start by learning enough PHP that you can, as you read through the code, you can start to pick out what is happening. And then the other thing is, if it's well commented code, you read the comment, you pick out the words that you know, and then you see the words that you don't know, or the code that you don't know, and put that with a comment telling, and you'll start to be able to say, oh, so that must, I don't know that command, but that must mean. And that's actually how we learn everything. That's how we learn English. That's how we learn. So for that reason, by deprecated code, for those of you who don't know, by the way, what that word means, that's a coding word, and it just means it's outdated. It's a previous version, like many things in languages, HTML, CSS, PHP, they come out with new versions of PHP constantly, in the same way that we have CSS3 now and HTML5. We have the latest PHP, and that PHP, things that used to be standard in PHP 5.2 becomes deprecated. Okay, it's like here's deprecated is legacy action sets. That's deprecated. Doesn't mean that we don't still use them now and again when they come in handy. We do. Someday they'll go away, but until then, we're going to use them. And in a lot of cases, I find that they're easier to understand. So that's why occasionally I will use them. Also, at times, we're not going to have the most efficient code possible. One, because we don't know how to write the most efficient code possible, and two, because, again, when I write in shorthand, it's harder to understand. If I write out every single word, even if that means I might be duplicating things, then it's easier to follow the flow. And so for that reason, we're going to continue to write things out maybe in ways that, someone who's trying to create elegant and efficient code that runs as quickly as possible is not going to write. But again, as I said the other day, we're running 100, 200 lines of code at the most. We're not running millions of lines at a time. So overhead on the server is really not an issue for us. And also, we're going to start with minimal error handling to make it, again, easier, faster to read or learn. As soon as you start putting all that error handling stuff in there, it gets really chopped up, and it's really, to me, it's really hard to understand the flow and what's happening in the logic. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't need it, and that's why we're putting in minimal. What error handling does is it makes things die gracefully if there's an error, instead of putting some big, nasty, ugly, black fatal error up on the screen for your client or user to see. And we could and should at some point do a course, just a day on 2 hours or so on error handling. But for now, that's the disclaimer. I'm leaving that out. If you are going to use this code on a client website, you should know that none of it is going to die gracefully if there's an error in it. And like Laura, I see you're on the call, so Laura knows all about ungraceful error codes, right? Because she fussed with it for a couple of days the other day. So those are my disclaimers. However, as you do more and more and more code, you will actually start to do less and less of these things on your own naturally, because you'll be learning and you'll start to pick up the higher level code. You'll start to write more efficiently. You'll start to see where you can clean things up so it runs more effectively and add error handling and so forth. So these are my disclaimers. This is what 80/20 programming is about, and I don't make any apologies for it because I think it's effective and I think it's exactly what we need. When you get done with this PHP course in 8 days, eight sessions from now, my objective is that you know the 20% of PHP that you need to get 80% of the result. That's what I'm going for over the next eight sessions. Okay. So any questions or comments about that before I move on? And I'm gonna, we'll see. I am potentially going to, since this is a small group, we have 14 people on the webinar at the moment. Someone is on their way in. I may experiment with unmuting you guys, maybe like having you raise your hand or something if you would like to talk and ask a question, because it's easier. If it's a short question or whatever and you want to just type it in, that would be probably expedient. But if you actually want me to unmute you so that you can ask a question, out loud, we will experiment with that and see how that goes. I'll mute you back just so that we don't all have to listen to a bunch of background noise. But so if you want to ask a question out loud, raise your hand. Otherwise, any questions or comments that you have, type it in the question box like normal. Okay? Okay. So I don't see any, so I'm going to keep going. All right. So today we're doing basically, the very beginner starting PHP, assuming that you guys don't know anything. Okay. Which I know is not true for all of you, but that's where we're going to start. So, so let's start with basically what is PHP. PHP stands for, PHP is weird. Its acronym is weird. PHP stands for PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. So PHP has its own acronym in its name, which is weird. I don't know. But anyway, that's what it stands for. PHP Hypertext Preprocessor, which is relevant when we get to the fourth bullet. So PHP is a server-side language. And what that means is that when a script is called, PHP sits on your server, the same server that hosts your website generally, but at Apache or some server somewhere. It also runs on basically any kind of server, which is one of the nice things about it. But anyway, it sits on the server. The server crunches that up, executes the file, the command, the script, and then sends it back down to your browser. Okay, now that's different than something which is called a client-side language. An example of a client-side language is JavaScript, of which jQuery is basically a subset. So jQuery and JavaScript, they both execute on the browser. So that's why you can do things like, adding things to order forms with jQuery, because those things are happening after everything's been processed and sent to your browser, and then your browser is basically adding an extra step at the end. That's client side. This is all happening server side before it ever gets to your browser. So if there's an error or something like that, it's going to be your server that says doesn't compute, right? Sorry, doesn't work. So it's a server-side language. It's open source. It's free. It's on almost every server that you can think of out of the box, basically. It's powerful enough that they write, amazingly complex programs like Facebook with it, and yet it is flexible and forgiving enough that it is an ideal language for people like us to learn, because it's very forgiving. It doesn't have the really strict kind of construct stuff that some other languages have. The files that you create, PHP files or scripts, can contain text and contain HTML. They can have CSS, JavaScript, or PHP in them. So the interesting, and this becomes self-evident once someone says it to you, but but to me it was like kind of a little light bulb going off. I won't say a major one, but a little one when someone finally articulated the fact that the output of PHP is rendered as HTML. So that's why they call it the PHP hypertext preprocessor. What does HTML stand for? Right? Hypertext markup language. HTML hypertext, right? So this is pre-processing the hypertext. The HTML is rendering it, okay? So actually these things work together, and the output of a PHP file is HTML. And I'm going to show you that because I actually think it'll kind of help you understand it a little bit better when we get down here to this little file here. And actually, I wish this fit on. Well, it doesn't fit on the page, so I'm gonna just grab this and so we're going to talk about the structure of a the structure of a PHP file. Copy and paste that. One second. Okay. Oops. Hang on, I'm doing this off screen. There we go. Okay, so so this is like about as basic of a hello. Oh no, I got it. This is about as basic as no, it didn't. This is copy. Hang on, of a file as you can possibly get. So let's make a new file and put this in here. One second. So we're going to call this file just php.php. Okay, so stick that on there. Okay, that's as basic of a PHP file as you can possibly get. So, so you already saw that all PHP files have a suffix of .php. Okay, they start. This is the opening tag here. Less than sign, question mark, PHP, no spaces. This is how you open it. And then this is the closing tag for PHP down here. So this says this is where the PHP starts, this is where the PHP ends, everything in between is PHP. Because as you can see over here, actually on a PHP page, you could have other stuff, right? Like I messed that up when I did that. But you could, you can have HTML and other stuff on the page. So this is what tells it where is the PHP. This to, can you guys see that, by the way? Should I make this bigger? Make this bigger. I got big screens, might as well just make it bigger. Okay. These 2 slashes are what we use to make a single line comment in PHP, or we can also use a hash. Either one says to PHP, ignore everything that comes after this. So sometimes you'll see, in fact, you see me do it in my code often, you'll see, you can even do it like this, right? So you've got a line of code here that it's going to execute, and when as it's moving left to right, when it hits those 2 backslashes, it says, oh, comment, ignore everything on this line, because it's a single line comment that comes after these 2 backslashes. So you can put it there or anywhere, right? Now, this, okay, is a multiple line comment block, obviously, spans more than one line. It starts with backslash star, star, backslash. Open, close, okay? So here are your 3 comments. And then the most basic of all PHP commands, echo hello world. Hello world, I still don't know where that came from. Someone who knows something about the history, I'm sure it came from, I don't know, maybe Hal said it. I don't know, it's something. But everybody uses hello world now as kind of like the default text string, right? So echo to hello world just says print hello world, right? Now, when I and then we have a closing tag. So I'm going to save this on my browser, or on my server rather. And when I hit preview, what are you going to see when I run this on the browser? Because remember what I said. I said that PHP is rendered as HTML. Okay? So this file has all this stuff, right? All these characters in it. But when I render it in a browser, and I'm not sure it's gonna, yep, it is. So all I see is hello world, right? And if I do an inspect element on this, look, I'm not sure if you guys can see that. Let me see if I can make that big enough for you to be able to see. But all that's in, yeah, I can. This entire file, right, is open HTML, open and close head, body tag, hello world, close body, close HTML. And that came from this because, again, it renders in HTML, and the only thing that was there was echo, which means print on the screen, hello world, the string hello world. So these quotes say string, right? So whatever's inside this, that's what we want to print, which is why on the preview, basically the only thing in the HTML is hello world. No quotes, because that's part of the PHP. Does that make sense to everybody, what I just showed you? Oh, look, more people are showing up. Awesome. I know it's a little bit, it's like, it's pretty basic, right? But one of the things like that kind of stumped me in the beginning was the difference between, say, running a script out of an HTTP post versus just looking at it on the browser. Like, I didn't really get that you could look at it on the browser. And even when I was doing it, because I saw other people do it, I didn't really understand why I could do it. I didn't, again, it was kind of like, oh, yeah, right? Of course, it's HTML, which is why we write web pages in it, and why we can mix JavaScript and CSS and things in here as well. So, all right, so Christy says, so if you open a PHP tag, the browser will put in the HTML body tag automatically. Yes, that is correct. It will, and by the way, it will not always have, depending on where you put it, it's not always going to have the HTML and the body tag in there. It may just have an H2 or something. But the kind of the different way to answer your question is, it figures out what the HTML should be unless you tell it specifically what you want. So let me just show you another example here. I'm going to get rid of this. And just because I was going to show you this anyway. So if I come over here now, so this is a little different, right? So this is a PHP file also. This file is called scratch.php. But if you look, it doesn't start with the opening PHP tag, right? It has HTML, body, an H1, right? So a header. And then it opens a PHP and it says, so in the middle of this HTML, we're going to execute this PHP. And in here happens to be echo hello world, but it doesn't have to be. So for example, I'm getting ahead of myself, but let's just make a variable and say, a equals 1, and we're going to make another variable which says b equals 1, and we're going to say c, I'm really bad at typing and talking at the same time, c equals, oh, and you know what, I'm like making mistakes, sorry you guys. So one of the things I was going to tell you, is that all PHP lines that aren't comments have to have this semicolon. You will spend a lot of time looking for your your missing semicolons until you get better at it and start to recognize the error that it throws. Yeah, same for head, same for all of those things, Brian. It kind of figures it out all by itself. So so here, what's going to happen, right, to y'all's point is, oh, and then I'm going to say echo C, echo C, and then semicolon. Okay, so basically, so you can tell what's happening here. I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to say preview. Okay, and so look, so now look what we have. So my first PHP is an H1 tag, and then it echoed the value of C, which is this is the PHP, this is the HTML. Let's go back and look at it again. See? So here's the H1, outside of the PHP. Here's the PHP that it just executed. Then it closed the body and closed the HTML. So if I inspect that element again, make this bigger. Oops, that's not it though. Hang on. Where'd it go? Oh, wrong one. Try again. There. Inspect element. Good. All right. Now make that bigger. So you guys see what it's done? Here's your, it looks like HTML, but there's actually PHP inside of that. Make sense? Cool, Brian. All right, so Tanya, so if you've copied your first PHP file to the server, how do you tell it to run? What this is, when I hit preview, this is essentially just going to it in a browser. So let me just answer that question, and I'll show you more clearly, because this was a stumper for me too. That's why I kind of wanted to show you this. So just I can't make this bigger, I apologize. But so on my website, trainandsimple.com, this is the home directory. Here in a second, I told you I've been having internet. So this is the home directory of trainandsimple.com. And in it, I have this folder called scripts. So here are my scripts, and hopefully you've made a folder for your scripts as well. So what I'm actually doing when I am hitting preview, because I'm doing it within the editor, but what I'm really doing is I'm going to trainandsimple.com/scripts/ what was this called? Scratch.php. So when I hit enter, I'm running that script. What's happening is the browser is saying to the server, can I have the file scratch.php please? And because the PHP is a preprocessor, okay, before it gives it to the browser, it's going to run it. It's going to process it. And then it's going to take the results and it's going to send it back to the browser. And then if the browser wants to do something with it, with JavaScript or jQuery or something, it can. So when I hit enter here in my Chrome browser, okay, I get the result of the script. You can see scratch.php. So at a basic level, this is the easiest way to make it run. Now, we have other ways to make it run within Infusionsoft, and but at its core, okay, because it's hypertext markup that we're creating, the way to make it run is to just go to that file in a browser. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? And did that clear that up for you, Tanya? Okay. Going to just trying it now. Okay, good. Good. Okay. So that's what it is. It's just basically it's creating well, and I'll go back here again, right? And so just we could if we wanted, of course, we could put CSS and all kinds of things in here, right? And generally this is not what you would do, but you can, if you had to, you can run CSS or even JavaScript or anything else right here in the middle of an HTML page if you needed to. Okay. Now the other thing that we can do that I want to make sure you guys understand is so what we have here is we have HTML, then we run some PHP, and then we go back, and then it says, okay, we're done with the PHP, now go back to HTML. Okay. However, let me just make sure that you also know that it could be like this. We could take this out, and I could take all of this out and these two out. So now what I have is I have all PHP. Okay. But what I can do, and what you will do often, is I can say from within PHP, I can say echo, and I can put quotes, single or double, which says this is basically a string, okay? And inside that string, I put my HTML, and then I close that line, because this is a PHP command, to echo this string, which when rendered by a browser will be a header called that says my first PHP page, and then close it with the semicolon, and then go about my business here. Now, and then I'm going to do one other thing here. I'm going to put a break in here. Well, actually, I don't think I need one because H1's going to break anyway. All right, so if I save that, so now it's the same thing, but because I've put it in quotes and told PHP to echo it when it comes out, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. So you can mix in, the point being, and you'll get better at it. Don't worry too much about the details of it, because you'll start to, as you start to use it, you'll start to get it. But the point being that because this is an HTML page that it is rendering, you can kind of mix and match HTML in amongst your PHP. Okay? Questions on that before I move on? Can I format the C? I sure can. I can either the value of C, you mean? Yep. All right. Yep. Absolutely, I can. So I can do that in a couple of ways. You know, first of all, if I had created a style for text in my HTML, it would apply that style just to the text or body or however I had done it. But if I wanted to, Ramona, in the same way that I did this, I can actually echo C with, you know, like with a div around it and a class around it, or however I want to spit that out. I can do that. So what that would, well, let me just show you what that would look like. Okay, so you got to, here what we've got to do is, yeah, output. So what we got to do is we're going to say echo, and then we're going to start with a quotation mark, and I'm going to say, well, we'll just do something easy, right? I'm going to say span color, no, sorry, span style equals color, and we'll say red, and then close that, and then close that, and then actually, so I got to make these single quotes because they're inside of a double quote like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, okay, so bear with me for a second, and I'm going to, don't look at this until I'm done, because I don't want to confuse you in the middle here. But what I'm going to do is like this, and then what I'm going to do here is close this span. So let me show you. And then I got to add one more thing, which is, I can do this two ways, but I'm going to do it this way and this way. Okay, now, so let me tell you what this is doing. Okay, so echo means print, right? We're going to actually talk about all these echo and things here in a bit. But as you can probably tell already, it means print. And so what I've done first is I've said print this string. And the string is the opening span tag, right? Color red. Hopefully I got all that syntax right. Now, this period means concatenate. So it's saying concatenate this string with the value of C, and then concatenate that with the closing, because you can't put this is PHP. These are strings. So when this is rendered on the, think about what it's going to render as when down here, I'll just write it out. We'll see it, right? It's going to render as this. It's going, well, you'll see. I'll just I'll just do it instead of writing it out for you. But you can see this is going to be the span, then 2, then span. Okay, so let's look at it. Hopefully I didn't see. So now here's my H2. Hopefully you can see that. And there's my red 2. Okay, and what I had to do in order to make that work is I had to put the HTML in quotes and echo it, okay, or to make it work, and then concatenated it with we're going to talk about concatenation and stuff when we get to the one on working with strings. So we're way ahead of ourselves here, way ahead, like 5 sessions, but that's okay. So that's how that worked. Does that make sense? Hopefully. All right, let me just see. Let me go through these questions. Okay, so I just answered that. Tanya, I'm gonna have to. I can't. I actually can't troubleshoot that parse error just off the top of my head, so we're going to have to come back to that in a second. Why don't you wait until after the class to try to run these, because I'm going to talk about getting set up so that everybody can follow along, and then we'll actually, even as a class little thing at the end, we'll go through your we'll screen share or do something and try to get this working. So okay, so we're going to come back to that. Remind me. Okay, so Ramona, yes. Sorry, gonna concatenation is the key. Never knew how to get the PHP and the HTML. Awesome. All right, so that made sense. Cami, when you put the HTML inside the PHP, what does it look like on the page when you view source? So I just did that, right? Oh, when you view source, right? So let's do that. So here's view source. Okay. We could also do inspect element, but so all that's here is the H1, then the span, and why did I get an extra? Oh, because I started writing and then, right? So that's what that looks like. We could also do it this way. Come on. Oh, I didn't save. Anyway, that's okay. I could do inspect element. No, it's not letting me do that. Anyway, you get the idea, right? Okay, let's see. All right. Oh, Tanya, it worked. Oh, okay, awesome. So, all right, we don't have to do that. So you don't actually, so Cami says, so you don't actually see the PHP code when you view source. Correct. You will never, ever, ever see the PHP. And the reason you don't see it is because it was processed on the server, and then the server sent over to the browser the HTML. So it never gets to the, whatever that PHP was, never got to the browser. Excellent. Okay. And Ramona, oh, good. View source made it make sense. Awesome. Okay. Okay. So hopefully that was helpful. All right. So what's next? Let's see. So we've talked about, back to the handout. So we talked about the structure of a PHP script. Let me make sure I'm just going to recap, make sure I didn't miss anything. It ends in PHP. It open tag, comment. Each line has to have a semicolon. It will protest loudly if it doesn't. Closing PHP tag. Now, let's talk about the closing PHP tag, actually. And Laura, this will be familiar to you because you kept asking me about this the other night, and I actually never stopped to explain it because I was too frustrated that we couldn't get that script to run. So that is this. In a script that contains nothing but PHP, the closing tag is optional. Very often you will see that this tag is just not there. When you're looking at, this is a great example because this is all PHP. So in this script, you will see it written very often like this, with an open PHP, no close. And in fact, what I have learned is that most people actually who are nerdy programming types, it doesn't hurt anything if you put it in there. But programmers will tell you that if this is all you've got, that you should leave it out, and because if you have it in there and then and you have like a white space or a line breaks or things after this closing tag, it throws an error. And it's something about header has already been sent, which I've had before and never knew what caused it. Now I know that's what it is. So they take this tag out just because when it's not needed, because it's redundant, to just remove the chances that you will get that kind of an error. So when you see PHP written without that tag, it is not a mistake. You don't need it because it's going to stop processing at the end of the file anyway. Okay, so that's leaving the closing tag out. Now, with that, I'm going to move on from structure of a PHP file to variables if there are no more questions on structure. Okay, so let's talk about variables. So you guys, if you've attended any of the extending Infusionsoft webinars that I've done, you've probably heard me refer to variable as Tupperware. Because to me, that's really the easiest way for me to think about it, mainly because, well, in my brain anyway, it acts just like Tupperware. So, if you think about when you serve dinner and you're done, you have some leftovers, right? What do? You grab the Tupperware, you stick the leftovers in the Tupperware, you close the lid, we don't really, but if we were going to store it for a long time and we were really hyper organized, we'd probably write on top of the Tupperware what is in the Tupperware. We'd give it a name, spaghetti, and then we'd store it in the freezer until we were ready to have it again for dinner, at which point we would take it out of the freezer, right? We take it out and, pull it out and put it on the stove. Well, that's exactly what a variable does. So the name of the variable, the $sign, that's like writing spaghetti on the top of your Tupperware. And but instead of having spaghetti in your Tupperware, you have data. And it can be any kind of data, okay? But it's stored in that Tupperware so that you can name it and call it by its name, right? Because if you said to your husband, if you had 50 Tupperwares in there, and you said to your husband or wife, hey, could you pull out the spaghetti? Well, they're not going to know which one's the spaghetti unless you named it, right? So it's the exact same thing. When you say to PHP, hey, PHP, can you pull out the spaghetti? It says, well, which one's the spaghetti? Oh, the one that's $sign spaghetti. Got it. Okay, so we name it so that we can refer to it, and we can move it around, we can store it, we can act on it. Very similar to Tupperware. That's what a variable is. Stores information. That's it. That's simple. So a variable can have any name you want, preceded by a $sign. So you could, for example, have a variable called, oh man, come on, Kim. I really think sometimes I'm just like getting old. Spaghetti equals string dinner tonight. Okay, that's a legitimate variable right there. Okay, with the string dinner tonight in it. You can have it, it can be whatever you want to call these variables. You just, the key is to make sure that it makes sense to you. Now there are a few little rules, but not many. So a variable has to start with a letter or an underscore, and it can be followed by any number of letters, numbers, or underscores. So, you could make it a book if you want, but generally you try to just name it something just, long enough that it's descriptive, and if you come back to it 3 years from now, you'll still know what it's referring to, but not so long, short or long that you write a book, okay? So you can call it whatever you want. The name of your variable is case sensitive. So $sign little a is different than $sign capital A. Two different variables right here. Okay, now that is different than most of the other things in PHP. So functions, classes, keywords, most everything else like echo, right? All those things, they are case insensitive. They don't care whether you write them in lowercase, uppercase, mixed case, they don't care. But a variable, because it is identifying something, is and it's not, like part of the language, right? So it doesn't know to expect it, is case sensitive. All right. There are common naming conventions that people use. One is to use separate pieces of the name with an underscore. One is to separate them with actually, you know what? I think that one's wrong. That's a file name. My bad. Because that's not allowed, I don't think, in a variable. Underscore is. But the other is what's called camel case. And camel case is, so all lowercase, underscore, and then camel case, which is like you start with a lowercase and then you make it a uppercase, and that's called camel case. Don't ask me why. So, and again, doesn't matter. Who cares? It's just whichever one makes sense to you. Can you mix them? I mix them all the time. But eventually you'll kind of start to settle on one that, for whatever reason, preference, totally preference. Okay. Now, how many people, let's see, we'll have you guys raise your hands. How many people have ever done any programming at all in any other language, any language at all? Can you raise your hand if that's you? Okay, I got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And we've got 14 here. So, oh, nope, 5. 1, 2, 3, 6. Great. Okay. So for those of you, what languages, those of you who raise your hand? Put it in the Fortran, .NET, COBOL Fortran Basic. Those are all mine too, Sean. PHP, okay. All right, Pascal, wow. Okay. Don't see any VBAs. All right. So for those of you who who programmed in other languages, one of the things that you will recall is that they used to make you, or those other languages still make you, declare your variables before you use them. So they're all different, right? But you would typically see something like this: var, this is going to be wrong, but VB as integer, right? Something like that. That's declaring a variable, and you're telling it this is a variable, and this is what we're going to put in our Tupperware, right? Are you going to put a liquid? Are you going to put a solid? Whatever. Okay, declaring a variable. Well, in PHP, we don't declare variables. There's one exception. We don't declare variables. In fact, there's no real command for declaring variables. What happens is that PHP creates the variable. It's declared at the moment that you first use it. And whatever you put in it at that when it's first used and created, that's what it says. Oh, okay, so there's an integer in here, so I guess this variable is about integers. And the other thing is that it'll switch for you, and it'll try to figure it out on its own. So if you have like dates, or great examples of that. We're constantly switching dates and times between strings and date time data types. So it just does that on the fly. If you switch it, it goes, oh, I think she's trying to make this a string, so we'll make this a string. Oh, now it's a date time again. And it doesn't care. That's what makes it so flexible and so good for beginners, okay? So you don't really have to worry about all that. It's called a loosely typed language, and it just sort of figures it all out on the fly for you. So we don't have to declare a variable. It can hold all types of data. Here are the types that it can hold. It can hold, well, there's more actually, but these are the basic ones. It can hold a Boolean, which if you don't know the phrase Boolean, it just means true, false. So if something's a Boolean, it can have only two results, true, false. A string, we've already looked at a bunch of strings. That's basically text. An integer, which is a number without any decimal points. A float, which is a number with decimal points or an exponent. an array, which is a list, which we're going to use a lot, an object, which is now part of like the new whole object oriented programming language, and then which is new for PHP actually here recently, and null, which is its own special type of data, but can be null. So those are the sorts of things that it can hold. And we already did this in the example, but we assign a variable using equals. So when we now, so if a variable is Tupperware and its job is to hold things, what you know is that if you see a variable, somewhere in that script is going to be something which defines it or assigns it a value, right? It's not, I mean, it has no point of being there if it's not holding something. So we do that with an equal sign, which gets a little tricky because when we get to operators, you're going to find out that this, oops, not that, this two equal signs actually means what we think of as equal. So when we're doing like conditions, like, you know, x equals 5, meaning this number and this number, this is 5 and this is 5, that's actually 2 because we use this to assign something to a variable. This is the assignment operator. So at this point, 5 is assigned to or put in the Tupperware called X. 10 is assigned to or put in the Tupperware called Y. And then in this little bit here, I said no closing tag, just again to reinforce that when all you have is PHP, then you don't need a closing tag. And by the way, another way to think of this, I guess, is I heard someone say it's actually a lot like algebra. If you took, you know, we all took algebra in high school, maybe college, right? Where we said X plus Y equals Z. Same thing, only kind of now we're putting, those were variables, right? So now we're just putting dollar signs in front of them. So that is variables, and we use them a lot. And in one of those things I said about like we are not going to write the most elegant code, and it's okay. One of the ways that I write, and I suspect you will too, inelegant code is I probably use way more variables than I need to. I may actually, you know, like pass things from one variable to another and add them together in ways when there's probably, you know, a lot of times I know there are like shorthand ways to do it without using all those variables. But again, here's why I do that. Because when I'm looking at the flow, right, from A to B, when I name them things and then say this equals this plus this, you know, blah, blah, it just helps my brain wrap around the logic a lot easier. It's almost like writing something out in longhand versus scribble notes. I don't know. So that's why I do it. Okay, so don't skimp on your variables would be my advice. Go ahead and do it. Who cares? All right, questions on variables before we move on. Okay, we're actually moving faster than I thought we would. Hard to judge when you haven't done these before how much time these are going to take. But this stuff is basic. When we like now, as soon as we move into like Tuesday and we start actually doing stuff, then it's going to slow down a lot because people are going to be following along and, you know, and actually trying to run things. And so I think it will get a lot slower because you're going to I want to understand all that. Does it? Great question, Tanya. Tanya says, "Does it matter how many blank lines you leave?" That's actually another excellent point. No. Well, let me say yes and no. PHP ignores white space. Totally ignores it. Means nothing to PHP. However, if you're writing millions of lines of code, it does matter. I mean, one of the things, if you guys run WordPress sites, for example, or any site, and you have someone optimize the site, one of the things that they do is they take your code and they take all the white space out of it. Actually, if you know anything about like JavaScript or jQuery libraries, there are versions of those libraries that are what are called minified. And one piece of minified means it has no white space in it. It's one big long run-on sentence. And that is because even though PHP doesn't care about it, it ignores it, it still has to look at it, and so it slows it down. And over 200 lines of code, that's such a fraction of a millisecond, it's meaningless. But over an entire WordPress site or what have you, then it can become meaningful. And so therefore, truthfully, you might not ought to have as many white spaces as I have, but again, to me, it makes it readable. And I use way more white space than most people probably do. I like a lot of white space. It just helps me to understand it, especially when I have to go back to it later and look at it. Okay, great question, Tanya. So let's talk about outputting your results, because one of my, let me find the cookbook here for a second. For those of you who don't know what the cookbook is, please don't spread this URL around, because it's not, I haven't put it behind a password or anything. It's just out there. But this is actually something I'm working on. A few people in this group have been helping. Peter, awesome, got his first recipe done today. Yay! Which one is it? Anyway, we could go look at it. Anyway, in the cookbook, one of the things that I talk about is this: as you are coding, and these are kind of the 3 things that I wish someone had told me, or I wish I had known when I started. They're not earth-shattering or anything, but boy, they really are helpful once I figured them out. One is to code in chunks. I talked about this all the time, which is you don't ever write 100 lines of code and then just run it and go, gee, I hope this works. Because if it doesn't work, it's really hard to figure out where it went wrong. It's a lot easier to write a little bit, test it. Oh, that works. Add a little bit more to it, run it, test it. Oh, fix it. Right? I call that the dang it method of programming, right? You run it. Oh, dang it. That didn't work. Okay, I'm going to fix that. Oh, it worked. Cool. So now I keep going. And you basically just add to it in chunks. Code in chunks. It will save you so much frustration. I can't even tell you how many times I have ignored that advice and then written the whole darn thing and then went, oh, I hope this works. And of course it didn't. It takes a lot longer to debug when it's not in chunks. So that's number 1. You can see number 2, which is what I'm coming to. Number 3 is create a snippet file. And actually one of the things I want to do for the community as a group, all of us as a community, is start to create a group snippet file that we all contribute to, as we write code and as we find things and as people post things on Facebook, that we create a kind of a community snippet file, because again, it just is a shortcut. Because you can never find it again when you thank you, Peter, great. You never find it again. But anyway, this one, output. This is what I'm referring to here. So the easiest way to figure out, to me, what is going on in your code, and therefore the reason I included it today before we get into anything else, like we start writing code and running code, is how to output your results. Because if you strategically place outputs in your code where it prints out the results of things and you follow those outputs, you'll very quickly start to see where something goes awry. That thing has no value when it's supposed to say 4 or whatever. Why is that date not, and it just kind of tells you where things got goobered up. So there are 4 ways. Oh, if I can find 4 main ways. There are other ways, but there are 4 main ways to output your results. The first one is print, and we'll talk about print and echo together, because they're almost the same, but not quite. Oh, hang on, because I'm just gonna I can't go past the cookbook without like giving a shout. Sorry, you guys, but without giving a shout out to Peter because he was the first one to finish his recipe. So, which is how to implement a counter. Look, you guys, this is Peter wrote this recipe about how to implement a counter and increment that counter when an action occurs. So this is what the whole cookbook is going to be when it's all done. Not only does it give you all the code right up front, if that's all you're looking for, but it actually explains that code step by step by step. And there'll also be, you can't see it, but there's a video that goes up here for each one of these. So awesome job, Peter. Thank you. Not to make any of the rest of you feel like slackers, because I haven't done any of them. So, but I did want to give you a shout out for great job. Okay. Yes, Brian, these will be recorded. Take care. Kids call, I understand. Okay, back to print. Print and echo are pretty much the same thing. I only ever use echo. Don't know why, because nobody ever told me about print. I think because I don't know why. I never saw it. Nobody ever used it, even though I know it's there. The difference is between echo and print is that they both print something. Duh. But print can only print one something. In other words, that concatenate thing that we did, Ramona, right, with this period in the middle, print can't do that. So it cannot print something with multiple parameters is the proper way of saying it. This is a parameter and this is a parameter. It can do hello world. It can even do hello world break. It can do a book, but it can't do multiple parameters. And therefore, since echo can do everything that print can do plus some, I guess everybody mostly uses echo, which leads me to question what's print about. But anyway, so just use echo. Now, if we, well, you've already seen echo in that, so I won't do that, but we'll come back to it. So the next one, this is a really handy piece of code, print R. And what print R does is print R takes a variable, like this is a variable, contact data, condat. This is like out of the API documentation. And it prints it in human readable form. That's what the documentation says. Print R prints the information in a variable in human readable form. Now, generally, if it's just a variable, a simple variable, you'll just use echo because echo is human readable. It doesn't matter. But where you use print R all the time is with an array. And remember that an array is a list. And so I need to find some way to show you what a array looks like. Well, here, let's just do one real quick. This is so handy that I keep it over here in my snippets, by the way. So, so let's just do this. We're going to assign, oh, get rid of this because it's going to choke on that because that means nothing. Okay. So we'll keep with the dinner theme. So we're going to say that menu equals an array. Okay, and remember that an array is a list. And by the way, we're going to do arrays later, so don't get twisted up over this. Okay, but in our array, or in other words, a list, we have what? We have hot dogs. You can tell I'm a healthy eater. And then we're going to put a comma next to that. And then we have hamburgers. And then we have spaghetti. Okay, that is an array. It's a really super simple one, but nonetheless, it's an array. Okay, now I'm going to get rid of all this stuff. So we don't need all that. Okay, so we now have an array. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use, if I say echo menu, and I save, and I say preview. Let's see what that looks like. Array. Well, that's not really helpful because what I want to see is I want to see what's in the array. Okay. So instead, what I have to do is I have to get rid of this because this is in the way. So what I have to do instead is I have to do a print R. So instead, I do this. I say print R. Oops. Here we go. Now, you don't have to do this, but I do because I just keep it as a snippet. Notice I've got an echo pre. This is HTML. And then I've got my print R, and then I've got echo pre again. Now, what echo pre does, the HTML tag, actually takes code and makes it pretty. It puts it in Courier and in, whatever. So you don't have to have this, but since I just keep it all together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this menu, okay? And I'm going to get rid of this. And then we're going to print it, and we're going to see what happens. So I'm going to save. So when I print it this time, now this is what we mean. Uh-oh. I didn't do that right. Oh, that's okay. I got my thing there, but that's okay. My array there. So what it does is it says the first item is hot dogs, the second item is hamburgers, and the third item is spaghetti. Okay. Now this is you might be thinking, well, that's weird because that doesn't say one. We'll get into this when we get into arrays. All arrays start with 0. That's the first spot in an array. You got to remember that. But so actually, this is the first spot equals hot dogs, and you can actually refer to hot dogs in a variable and call it out and whatever. But anyway, print R, the point being, not what is an array, but that in order to print or output what's in an array, you use print R rather than echo, because echo won't print an array. So that's really, really handy because especially when you get arrays of arrays and it gets really confusing, the best thing you can do is just print it out and figure it out. Because a lot of times it's like, why can't I get that value to come out and, and show up on the screen? And because I'm calling it wrong, I've got, but it's just print it. It's easier to figure out. All right. So that is print R. And the main one here is var dump. So var dump is kind of like the catch-all. Var dump, the difference between var dump and say echo or print R is that var dump not only tells you what's in a variable, but it also tells you what kind of variable it is. So if I do var dump and I do menu, then, and I say save, and I do preview. Okay, so now it gives me a little bit more information than printar did. You can see, right? So one, it says that I have 3 items in my array. That the first one is a string with 8 characters. The second one's a string with 10 characters. The third one's a string with 9 characters, right? If there was something else in here, like a float or an integer or whatever, it'd tell me that too. Okay, so if I did, so just similarly, if I had a variable instead of an array, if this thing was like this, let's just imagine menu, I don't know why, but equals 1.2345, and then I run that. So now it's going to tell me that it's a float, right? So that's the difference between var dump. Var dump is just kind of like blah. It throws up everything it knows about that variable, whereas the other ones are all kind of formatted. Any question about that before I move on to writing to a file, which is the last thing we're going to do on outputting results? Anyone? Nope. Okay, cool. Is this too basic for you guys, or are you okay with this? I should probably check in on that just to make sure. And I know I'm probably going to get some mixed results there, but what do you guys think? Okay. All right, very good. Probably wouldn't tell me if it was too basic anyway, but that's okay. It will get, trust me, it will get a little more challenging as we go along. Okay, we're gonna ease into it. All right, so this is the last one. This is well, never mind. That's neither here nor there. I'll just show it to you. So this one is about writing to a log file. So rather than printing on the screen, we're going to write it to a file. So I'm going to copy and paste this like this, and I'm going to put this in here. Whoops, so that we can see what this looks like. So what this is saying is, some space. Okay. This is a variable file. Okay. And then a command. And then these are arguments to the command. Basically, anytime you see this parentheses, then stuff inside of it, those are known as arguments. Okay. Same here. Same here. So these three commands, this is just a variable. It's assigning the results of this command to a variable. Again, so we can do things with it. So it says fopen, meaning file open, which means create a file called mylog.txt. And then it's got an argument. Now, if we look up fopen, and you can do that on your own, just in Google, type up PHP fopen, and you'll see that there's like a list of 8 or 10 arguments that you can put in here. The most common one is R. This one's A+, means it's going to append whatever we write in this file to whatever is already there, if there's anything there, and I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so A+ means open the file and or append to the file if it already exists. And then fwrite, you can figure out what that does, right? It says, all right, we've assigned this file to a variable called file. So what we're saying is, so in that file, I want to write hello world, and then I want some line breaks so that the next time I write to it, right, every line isn't a run-on sentence. And then, got to do our housekeeping. We're going to go back to that file and we're going to close it, fclose. Okay, so let's just run this and see what it does. So I saved it. If I go to preview, now notice nothing is on the page. Why is nothing on the page? Well, because, oops, I didn't echo anything out on the page. I didn't print. This is PHP. PHP does not print. It renders the results of PHP, but only if you tell it to. Right? We didn't tell it to echo anything. We told it to write it to a file. So it did that and then just gave us a blank page. So now if we go look for a file, right, and by the way, this file, unless we tell it otherwise, is always going to be in the same directory as our script. So if I do a refresh here on my file list, right here is a file called mylog.txt that it created at 4:43 p.m. And if I double click on that, you can see it says hello world, right? So it wrote whatever I asked it to write to that file. Now, if I close that and I go to preview again and I refresh and therefore run it again, we can't really see that it ran again, but it did. Because in refreshing it, I called that script again. So now if I go and I open it again, you'll see that now hello world's been written twice. And that is because, one, I put a line break here, right? And two, I said to append and not wipe it out. We could have done that as well, but we, just every time you write to this file, make it wipe out the file and start fresh. But I didn't. I appended it. Okay, so we can put anything we want in here. Whatever you put in this fwrite statement, you can put IP addresses, you can put dates and timestamps and error messages and variables. You can do that that print R that I just did, you know, and it'll actually put that print R, it'll dump that variable into that file. You can do a var dump in there. You can do whatever you want. Can go inside. I'd have to clean up all those quotes, but anyway, you get the idea. Can go in that log file. Now, why would we use that instead of just printing on the screen? When you are testing, you've written your script and you're about to run it, and most of you know that when I'm writing scripts, I will generally, let's just pick one. Of course, it's going to be one that doesn't have it. Let me use one that does. Hang on. I almost always have a something that looks like this, right? Because we run posts on most of our scripts, I will have a section where I hard code the values of the posts, and then I will have a section where we actually get the posts, the actual post. And I do that because that way I can, if it's hard coded, I can run it in the browser, I can troubleshoot it, I can figure out all the errors, and then I can let it run from like Campaign Builder or whatever, and hopefully I won't have errors. But let's say I do, right? Well, because when it runs from Campaign Builder, I can't echo. I can leave these echoes in, but I won't see them. It runs, and it never, because there's no browser, right? So I don't know what it's printing. So the only way to see it once you you get away from that, once you start running it as like a thank you page or a HTTP post snippet or what have you, is to have it dump the results to a file. So basically, I use a log file when I'm blind, but I try to get all that sorted out. That's kind of a last resort for me, because hopefully I got it all figured out before I went blind, if that makes any sense at all. Questions on that log file? And by the way, again, you can call it whatever you want. I just happen to pick my log, but whatever name you put in here is what it's going to call it, right? My log. Questions on that? It's a very handy tool. So the lesson is print, 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 print. Printing is your friend, because it will tell you what is going on in your script, and it will tell you when it goes wrong, how and where it went wrong. No questions on that? Okay, awesome. I know, it's kind of basic stuff. All right, well, we're going to move on then. So that's that is actually the end of just the PHP stuff for today. Oh, heck. So I have a homework assignment for you. And what I want you to do, so this is for those of you, few of you, well, let me ask rather than, so how many of you already have, are already set up so that you could run PHP now? You've got your FTP and your text editor, and you can run a script even, if it doesn't, even if you get errors. How many of you have done that? Tanya did, because she just did it, and I know Peter did. Awesome. Darcy, Christy. Okay, everybody else has not gotten to that point yet. Okay. Oh yeah, David, Sean, I know Laura can. Okay, good. So most of you actually. Pretty sure you can. Okay. Oh, Ramona, you're running MAMP. That's ambitious. Okay. Yeah, I know. I use it. I use it too. Okay. So for those of you who don't, so I'm going to go through this really quickly, because most of you have this, but for those of you who don't, here's, in order to be able to do this, because what I would like to have is I'd like to start to get interactive. Tanya, does that mean you want to? Are you? Oh wait, no, you're right. I had people raising your hands. Tanya, does that mean you want to ask a question out loud, or you were raising your hand from before? Because I can't remember who I cleared and who I didn't. If you want to ask a question out loud, raise your hand again. Oh, it's for the question. Okay, then I'm going to do that. Hang on one second. I'm going to unmute you. All right, it's all yours.
Hi. No, I meant the when I said for the question, it was because you asked
Oh,
who had already got the
got it.
editor thing.
Okay. All right. So it was for the question. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Never mind.
Okay, thanks.
Well, at least we know this works.
That's true.
All right. Very good. All right. Tanya's back on mute. Okay. So back through this. So if what I would like to have happen is that as we go through the rest of the 7 modules, that as best as you can, you kind of type along and experiment, because I think you learn it a lot better. It's just like writing notes in class, same idea. If you're actually doing it, what I'm saying will sink in a lot better than if you try to go back and recreate it after the fact. It's not terrible if you recreate it, but I find that it's just better if you can follow along that way. And if you get, if you just can't keep up because you're getting an error or something that we can't stop and troubleshoot, you'll just be that much farther for um, um, when you do go back. So these are the things that you're going to need in order to be able to write and run code. This is not API stuff, all right? I'm just talking PHP at the moment. That is it. Okay, I didn't mention a server because I actually kind of assumed that, but I should, but I shouldn't assume that, because Ramona just reminded me. So most of you will use your web server, um, or some people will have a local server set up on their desktop machines, which is what Ramona was talking about. Okay, which you can do too. It's a lot more technical. So most people just use their web server. It's the easiest, just like I was doing, it's the easiest way to do it. All right. So first of all, you need a server running what we call LAMP, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. Okay. All your servers do. And then you don't have to get a free one, but I suspect when you start out, you want a free one, either a text or a code editor. The difference between a text and a code editor is, see how my code editor puts nice colors on things? It's called a syntax highlighter. The nice thing about a syntax highlighter is that when things are wrong, in like you leave out a semicolon, or you leave out a, well, that didn't do it, but, or you leave out, if I had a long code, it would, you leave out a quotation mark or something, you'll start to realize that things after that become the wrong color. And it just helps to kind of, you start to know that these should be, strings should be red and these should be purple, and then if they're not, it's like, wait a minute, why is that not the right color? And you'll start to fix it. So syntax highlighters are nice for that reason, but they are definitely not required by any stretch. That's the difference. Text editor will not have that highlighting. A code editor will. So some free text editors, I know there are more, but free text editors, Text Edit comes on Mac standard, Notepad comes on Windows standard. There's also Notepad++, which is free, which is kind of a souped up version of Notepad that a lot of people really, really like. The one thing I will tell you about Text Edit, for those of you who are Mac, I found this out the hard way in a screencast, is that come on, open. Just give me a plain old document. Is that when you're creating something in Text Edit, if you don't say make plain text right here, it will not let you save it as a PHP file. It took me a long time to figure that out. So that's the little caveat about Text Edit. You got to know to make rich text, make plain text. It's got to be plain text for you to be able to save as a PHP file. It will not give you that as an option in the file formats you can see, if you haven't set it to plain text. Okay, so Notepad or Text Edit will work perfectly fine. No line numbers though, so when you get an error and it says, such and such is wrong on line 46, you don't really know where line 46 is. So that's the other reason syntax highlighters are handy. Then you can get into these are like examples. Text Wrangler on Mac is a free code editor. Komodo Edit is another one that's available on both Windows and Mac, free. Then we get to Carrot. So Carrot is interesting. Carrot is a Chrome app. Really interesting. So you get it from the Chrome store for those of you who have Chrome browser, and this is Carrot right here. And I also have, if you're, well, I don't have it on here, but anyway, I have a launcher down here for Chrome apps as well. So when I launch Carrot here from Chrome, you see, this is actually a desktop thing, even though it's a Chrome app. It's a standalone. I don't have to have internet, but it's not. It's a Chrome app. Anyway, I just discovered Chrome apps. Maybe I'm way behind, but it's kind of cool because it's a basic free text editor that you get from the Chrome store, and you can change your themes, and you can make it all different colors and things, and so that's actually kind of a nice little, really, it's a nice text editor, I think. And then, so that's Carrot. When you close it, it just goes away because it's not a Mac app, it's a Chrome app. And then the other one that I wanted to mention, which is also kind of cool, is Code Anywhere. So Code Anywhere is actually a web application. You do have to have internet in order to use it, but the kind of nice thing about this is your code goes anywhere. They have iPhone apps and everything. It's codeanywhere.net. And the other interesting thing about Code Anywhere is that it has a built-in, so now we're starting to get like towards the features in a paid editor. So a lot of the paid editors you probably saw, right? So yeah, this is Coda. This is what I use. The two big, Coda is Mac only. So, the two main editors, unless you're like really super geek, is our Sublime Text and Coda. I think if you poll most of the ICCs and ICDs, they probably mostly use one of these. And then, the nice thing about this is that it's got everything all built in. So this is my FTP. And by the way, so let me just clarify this. I know this is really, really basic. However, I have had, I was surprised that I was using this terminology and not everybody understood what FTP even really did or was. So just to be clear, FTP is kind of like Windows Explorer for your server. Or if you're a Mac person, it's Finder for your server. It's a way for you to, this is the left-hand side of FTP is your local machine, and the right-hand side is your server. And so you can drag files from anywhere on your local machine up to your server, and back and forth, right? So that's what it is. Just think of it as Explorer or Finder for your server. That's what FTP means. But like Coda, for example, I'm coming back to Code Anywhere. There's a reason I'm telling you this. So besides being an FTP client built into Coda and a text editor, which allows me to actually sit here, what I've been doing while we've been talking is this is a file on the server. I open it up. I do what I want to do, and then when I hit save, it's saving right back to the server. So I actually don't have to go to that extra step of opening it here, saving it, then opening it on the server. Oh, make a change here, dragging it back, open on the server. Oh, make a change here, drag it back. Okay, so it's kind of saves some steps. And then the other nice thing about this is it has just you don't have to worry about now, but for me anyway, I use Terminal, which is command line, and I also use MySQL databases. And so it has all of those on my server all built in. I can access them all from one place. So that's what you start to get when you start getting into paid editors. But those, like run 70, a lot of them, that one's, I don't know, more than $70, I know. So anyway, but the reason I told you that is because here's Code Anywhere, which is free. It's on your browser, and it doesn't have all of that, but it has a lot. It has a built-in FTP client, right, which is right here. So this is my sites. Same thing as what I was accessing on Coda, and I can just, go to a file, um, right on the server, pull it up, type, and then hit save, and it saves. I can change my settings, I can change my languages, I can, do all kinds of cool things here, make it more visually appealing. But then if you want to, it gets, for those of you who care, besides FTP, come on, this is the only thing I don't like about it, is it's Ajax, and so I sometimes have a hard time grabbing things. Anyway, but I can pull things into and out of my Dropbox. I can connect Dropbox, and I can connect GitHub, and I don't think I can connect Bitbucket. But anyway, this is a version control system that you use when you have multiple programmers working on the same site, which we do. But anyway, so like, and this is the free version, and then when you go to premium, I think there's all kinds of other stuff that you get too. So if you don't, this is an option for you too. If you just want pretty, but you don't want to have to figure out all those other things, you can get this everywhere, just right on your browser. So that's Code Anywhere. All right. So that's code editors. Let's go back to, I'm already there. Let's go back to, what window am I? Did I shut that? I might have hit. Oh, heck. I did. Give me a second to get the handout back up. Google Drive. Google Drive. Sometimes I get a little aggressive on the X. There we go. Okay, so back to this. Okay. So you're going to need a code editor or a text editor. We've gone through that. Oh, and I forgot to mention, by the way, cPanel. Some of you use this. I hate it, but a lot of people love it. cPanel actually has an editor built right into it. For those of you who don't know, cPanel is, if you go into your, do I need to go, I'll ask that question. Because Peter, I see that you said a quick lesson on setting up Coda. Okay. Maybe we could do that off either as maybe a different lesson and or as a one-off for anybody who's interested, because some people might not be. But my question is, do you guys know what, how many of you know what cPanel is and even know how to get into the back of your server? Raise your hand if you're comfortable with cPanel, or you at least know how to find it and what it does. I would think, right? Most people would. I would, maybe. Okay. Almost everybody does. So I'm going to give you for those couple people who don't, there are a few, I'm going to give you the 10-second version of this. So if you have, this is shared hosting. This is mine. I use Site 5, and so almost every shared host, well, even dedicated host, till you get really fancy, has some version of this, and they give you something called cPanel. You go into it, and it looks something like this. And so cPanel is how you access all the different things on your server. So it's how you set up FTP accounts, and it's how you add domains and get to create databases and run cron jobs down here and the other stuff that most of us will never touch, right? But one of the things that it has is, number one, it has a file manager, which is a passable FTP client. If I go to File Manager, and I have seen a lot of people, as I've been helping them with their scripts, use this. So I know that some people use this as their default. This is not bad, right? So this is actually just right out of cPanel. You can go into your cPanel, and without having to download or get any kind of FTP client whatsoever, go right into, scripts. And lo and behold, not only that, but there's a code editor. So if you hit right here, code editor, and there's an HTML editor as well. I don't know about what is that. Yeah, okay, whatever. So it'll just bring your files up in its own little code editor. And when you save it, again, you're saving right on the server. So that's an option too for a code editor if you just want to go. If you've never been in, if you don't know cPanel, I would really encourage you to just get the basics of it. I'd be happy to help you with that. Someday when you're by yourself at 2 in the morning and something goes wrong, um, unless you have a completely hosted heroic support situation, then it's just handy to know. It's like getting a flat tire on the side of the road at 3 in the morning. Yeah, you could call AAA, but it's kind of handy to know how to change the tire. So anyway, so that's your cPanel, and that is in your cPanel as well, your built-in editor and your built-in file manager for FTP. That's also built into some of the editors, like I mentioned, like Code Anywhere and so forth. The main one, though, for FTP that I recommend, it's the simplest one. It's for Mac and Windows. It's free. It's called FileZilla. There are lots of others, but that just happens to be one that I can recommend and know that most people can figure out fairly easily. So you would go download FileZilla. Don't download FileZilla server. That's something different. FileZilla FTP client, and set it up with your FTP credentials, which are basically going to usually be the same ones as you get into cPanel. Most of you will have those because you can't update your websites without them. So if you need help with that, let me know and I'll help you offline. So you set up your FTP, and then, so these are the steps, right? So the first one is you create a file called something.php using your editor here locally, okay? Like pull up whatever, TextEdit or Carrot or one of those, and you create your file. You save it. So you can save it on your desktop, you can save it in My Documents, wherever you're going to save it. Then, for most of you who don't have the ability to save into your server directly, like with FileZilla, you'd log into your website with your FTP. I better do this. You'd navigate to your home directory. Oh, I don't have this is a new computer and I don't have FileZilla on it. Okay, hang on. So we'll just do it this way. But I'm going to do it with Coda, but it's the same idea. So imagine that this is FileZilla because this is always going to be the same idea, left and right. So imagine that. So here, TextEdit or something. What do I have here? Smultron. All right, so this is a text editor. So I create a file. This is my file. And I save it, right? And I'm going to save it on my desktop as whatever, something.php. And I say save. So this is my PHP file. I've got my text in there. You can see it's here on my desktop. Okay. So then now when I go in my FTP client, when I go to desktop, which is going to be back here, desktop, you're going to see I have now something.php on my desktop. And to get that into my scripts folder, I'm going to open scripts. I could drag it onto the top of the folder, but everyone knows how to do that. I just drag it and I let go. And now there's a copy of something up here on my server that when I go to my browser, it doesn't really say anything. But now if I go to my browser and say train in simple scripts something.php, it's probably going to error. But yeah, page not found. But had I put PHP in there, it wouldn't have. All right. So dang it method. I say, dang it, that didn't work. So I'm gonna just do this real quick. I'm gonna say, oops, question mark, PHP. So now it really is a PHP file, and I say, hello world, and I better echo hello world. It's not gonna work. Echo hello world. Okay, and I save. But now when I hit save, this is the key point, okay, for you guys that are new. When I hit save, I didn't save it on my server. I saved it here on my desktop because that's this version. So now what I have to do is quick, I go back over here and I just drag it over here again. See, and it says, oh, really? You want to replace that? Yep, I want to replace that. Okay, and so now, see it updated. So now when I refresh this, hopefully it's going to you know what? It's because I misspelled it. Probably would have printed the first time. There. Hello world. Okay? So that's kind of your workflow. When the two aren't integrated. Change it, drag it, change it, drag it, try it, dang it, try it again, like that. Okay? Okay, so we drag the file into the folder, make sure you saved it, you navigate to your file in the browser, and then every time you save a change to the server, you need to refresh in the browser. So that's how you get set up and to be able to do your homework and follow along in class. So what I would like you to do, unless this homework was just like absolutely rudimentary for you, but if it was not, if this is like kind of new stuff for you, or even you did it before, but it's been a really long time, then what I would suggest you do is to go take all these pieces of code that I have here in the handout, put them in a file or files, add whatever is necessary to make them work, because you will notice that a lot of them are not complete, right? This doesn't have PHP. Some of these may or may not work. So that's kind of a good exercise, is to just make sure that you can get them all working. The main point being for you to get familiar with the workflow and the structure of a PHP file. And then from there, I would hope that you would play some, which is my big point to everybody when I did the ICCU seminar. I think all of us, it's human nature to really worry about messing around with files on our servers, because in a language that we don't understand, because what if we call some big strong guy it's the equivalent of not knowing the language and making a horrible mistake, right? And getting our butts in trouble. But you're not, right? Unless you do something that logically really didn't make sense, you're not going to break anything. So try things. The dang it method of programming is the best way to learn, I think. So get your files up there and try it. If it doesn't work, no problem. So you just keep trying. The last point on homework is that if you have questions or tips for others, like as you're doing things, as we go along, you're going to start to figure stuff out. Like you're going to start to recognize patterns and things. Hey, you know what? Every time I get this error, it's always because I forgot a semicolon. So I should probably tell everybody else who's learning API so they don't have to figure that out for themselves. That's what I mean by tips for others. You don't have to know a lot to be willing to share what you've learned. It's really helpful. If you have questions, if you have something like that you want to share, or you just want to say, yay, I did it, my script ran, this is awesome, and I feel like a rock star, please post that in the Facebook API Learners group. I created that learners group because it's a little bit safer than for those of you who are ICCs, than the ICC group, because there really aren't as many advanced people in there, and the ones who are there because they understand that we're all learning and they want to help. So hopefully it's safer. So please, if you're not a member of the Facebook API Learners group, go ahead and join that, and post and share and support one another and answer one another's questions. He who teaches learns twice. So if someone has a problem, even if you don't know the answer, by helping them solve it, you will actually learn a great deal. So that is it for today. I will take questions, but I do also want to just tell you what is Tuesday. The next class is Tuesday at same time, 4:30, and what is it? Do you guys know? 8020 PHP. Hang on. It is. Nope. It is. Here we go. It's getting data from one place to, here it is. I'll just put it up here. It's this. This is Tuesday. Getting data from one place to another. We're going to use get, post, request. We're going to do redirects. Now redirects are cool because this is what says go from send the browser from this page to another page. So this is how you do things like sending people to a custom thank you page, for example, depending on what's happened in the script, things like that. This is what allows you to use scripts as thank you pages and then send them to the thank you page. So we're doing get, post, request, redirects, and also URL encode, which is just allows you to this is all about what this is all about is actually like it says, getting data from one place to another. So for example, from a form into your script without breaking. So URL encodes are about query strings and making sure that weird characters in your query strings don't break, things like that. So that is what is Tuesday. Tuesday, I told you we're like going to start to get into the meat pretty quickly, but we're going to keep it really, really, really basic. Simple. All right. Oops. PB. Why can't I type and talk? All right. Good thing I don't have to make my living doing that. All right. Any questions on any of this? Comments? Anything you need help with? Anything at all before we close up? Okay. Hopefully I haven't bored you guys to death. All right. Well, then we're going to close up. Okay, sorry, just reading. Good. All right. Well, that's it for today. So hopefully I'll see everybody Tuesday, 4:30. In the meantime, if you have any questions or need any help, I'm happy to help. You know how to reach me, Kim at kimsnyder.com, or yes, Tanya, I do have time for a chat. Good, great. Reading comments. Yeah, so just get in touch with me if you need help, and I'll see you guys around, and otherwise I'll see you Tuesday. Bye, everybody. And Tanya, I'm going to unmute you, and we can have a chat.